Thank you very much. Thank you, Daniel, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation to come and celebrate this wonderful milestone with you this evening, and what a special milestone it is. Thank you also for waiting briefly for me. I had to at least see the beginning and the first half of the Bafana game at Cape Town Stadium. I can tell you gladly that when I left, it was 2-0 to us. And I'm told that since it is now 3-0 to us. So, folks, there really aren't many organizations or institutions in the whole of South Africa that have been around and active for 120 years. It really is an extraordinary span of time, during which our city, and indeed our world, has changed dramatically. Back in 1904, when the Cape Board of the SA Jewish Board of Deputies was formed, Cape Town would have felt very, very different to the world we now inhabit. Electric trams whizzed up and down Kloof Neck to Camps Bay, where the latest in high-tech public transport was those old steel trams running around Strand Street up to Tamboerskloof and around Cape Town. And the very first early motorized buses were being tested in the city right alongside the first imported motor cars that were just arriving in Cape Town at the time. We were still a few decades away from the huge land reclamation project that is now our foreshore. Some of the most valuable land in the city was not even there yet, where our harbour sits today. And the city was just about to replace the old Mully Point Lighthouse, which, will you believe it, was still being powered by sheep fat oil. It was replaced just a couple of years after the board was formed with a modern new lighthouse, and that still stands today. Our iconic City Hall just down the road was under construction, but still more than a year away from completion. South Africa had just emerged from the devastating Anglo-Boer War. We were still 6 years away from becoming the Union of South Africa and still a decade away from the Great War in Europe. But by then, Cape Town was already established as quite a thriving little port city, with a population of just less than 200,000 people in the entire city. It's almost in that unrecognizable world that the Cape SA Jewish Board of Deputies was formed to promote the welfare, safety, and development of the Jewish community of this mother city. And for the next 120 years, through 2 world wars, global economic depressions, 4 decades of apartheid, South Africa's liberation and transformation into a modern democracy, and everything that has happened since in the last 30 years, the Cape SA Jewish Board of Deputies has been here, and hasn't just been here, but has gone from strength to strength, playing an ever bigger and bigger part in the unity and prosperity of the people of Cape Town as a whole. That is an incredible achievement. But I also know that this longevity is not something that happens by accident or by default. It is the result of a constant and deliberate effort to serve the community and to look for ways in which you can strengthen that community. And of course, when I say the community, I mean the Jewish community of Cape Town. But of course, there's also a far broader benefit for the entire city and all of her people, because the success and prosperity of Cape Town's Jewish community has a knock-on effect, a huge multiplying effect throughout our city. The success of many Jewish-owned businesses has been a massive part of the success of Cape Town's economy, employing tens of thousands and if not hundreds of thousands of people in our city over the years. Employment created through these businesses has meant dignified work and sustainable livelihoods for thousands of Cape Townians, whether they are Jewish or not. The community's investment in basic and higher education has benefited our entire city and continues to do so. And the work that you still do to financially support those in need in your community takes a weight off the state's shoulders and is an inspiration to us all. And the reason why Cape Town's Jewish community has been able to do so well and make such a huge and lasting impact in our city is because it is a real community in every sense of the word. as you've heard so eloquently this evening already. The word community refers to a group of people with a shared history, or who are considered a unit because of their common interest. The word itself actually comes from an old French word, which means commonness. It speaks to the fellowship and cohesiveness among the people that make up that community. And I think that this concept is perfectly demonstrated by the strong sense of civic duty and civic pride that is evident in all that this community does. In the Cape Town context, this is incredibly important to us. I'm sure you're aware that our city is on a different path to most other cities in South Africa. And people often ask me why this is. How is it that we've managed to achieve this? Is it because our resources are significantly greater, or we collect our revenue better? Is it that the benefit of a truly professional and capable city government? Is it long-term planning? What is it? It might be a bit of all of these things. But there's something else too that sets Cape Town apart. And deep down, I think this might be even more important than all the rest. We have so many incredibly active and motivated and committed communities within our city, each of whom, in their own way, are rolling up their sleeves and playing a huge role in protecting the welfare and rights of the Cape Townians who make up those communities. I suspect that we may have the strongest and most active civil society in all of South Africa. And we also have an amazing network of ordinary citizens serving on all sorts of bodies and volunteer organizations who do an incredible job of looking out for fellow Cape Townians. This cuts across all cultures, races, and religions. The city's big, generous heart can be found everywhere, but it is particularly evident among our city's Jewish community. Through dedicated fundraising efforts and a host of social education and welfare philanthropic projects, Cape Town's Jewish community consistently punches far above its weight in numbers, with only roughly 16,000 people currently living in the Cape Town community, I'm told. This would also explain why Jewish Cape Townians have played such a leading role in Cape Town's politics over the last century and a bit. It's incredible to think that despite the Jewish community being relatively small in comparison to the Cape Town community, it has produced no less than 13 holders of the office that I now hold since the Cape SA Board of Deputies was founded 120 years ago. And I'm led to understand that 13 is an important and significant number in the Jewish community, in the Jewish faith. Starting with the term of Chaimi Lieberman all the way back in 1903, then to Louis Gradner in the mid-1930s, Abe Bloomberg in the years following the war, and in the 50s and 60s, Fritz Sonnenberg, Alf Honigman, Walter Gradner, the 70s and 80s, with Richard Friedlander, David Bloomberg, Ted Mauberger, Louis Kreiner, Solly Kreiner, and Leon Markowitz. A very busy period in the 70s and 80s. And of course, our last mayor before South Africa transitioned to democracy, and the woman who oversaw that transition here in Cape Town was Patricia Kreiner. What a remarkable and impressive list of city leaders. And it's my great honor to follow in their footsteps in the office of mayor and try to emulate some of the wise and far-sighted decisions that they took for our city. The impact of Cape Town's Jewish community on the city has been undeniable, and it's been a wonderfully positive impact over a very long period of time. I was personally reminded of this a few months ago when I had the privilege of joining a day of remembrance and celebration, both for the 95th anniversary of a company called Cape Gate Holdings and for the fascinating story of the history of the Jewish community of Parow, close to where I live in the north of the city. That particular chapter was such an interesting and significant part of our city's history, and it's something I think all Cape Townians should know about. On that same day, Richard Mendelsohn, who may be here, launched his book, The Jews of Parow, which I have since read quite a bit of and paged through and picked up chapters here and there. And it's been really wonderful to read some of the anecdotes and stories of early 20th century Parow in the Jewish community. And also, on the same day, there was the opening of a similarly titled exhibition here at the museum. So hopefully that part of our history has now reached a wider audience, because it is a compelling story that has similarities and links and parallels with much of the Jewish community in the broader Cape Town as well. A handful of families from places like Lithuania, Latvia, Russia, and other parts of Eastern Europe who settled in an unassuming little corner of the world, right at the southern tip of Africa, and in that particular case, in a very unassuming neighborhood in that tiny little corner of the world, somewhere halfway up Voortrekker Road, and went on to build an extraordinary legacy and community here in this place. On that day of celebration in particular, we remembered families like the Kaplans and the Meyers and the Kushliks and the Friedmans, and all the other business owners and families who not only built lives for themselves in Parow, but built an entire community. They demonstrated much of what the characteristics are of the Jewish community of Cape Town today. They took care of their neighbors, they funded schools and universities, they built museums, and they even built the beautiful walkway that today connects Muizenberg with St. James. While many Cape Townians remain unaware of this community's history, it was wonderful to spend that day just a few weeks ago and to learn more and more, as I have done over the years, of this community's wonderful history in our city. This remains an important living link to a part of our history that helped shape what Cape Town is today. And so I really want to use this opportunity as we celebrate 120 years with the Cape SA Jewish Board of Deputies to thank you for that incredible contribution over these 12 decades, for being such loyal and committed partners in Cape Town's project of becoming a city of hope for all who live here in the mother city. And for demonstrating, thank you, and for demonstrating through your actions and not merely your words what it truly means to be a real community. I wish you a very heartfelt Mazel Tov for these first 120 years. I must remind you, though, that perhaps more so than anyone, you will know that Jewish history is measured in millennia, not centuries. So I must point out that 120 years, while a long time, is only 12% of 1 millennium. And so there is still a long, long way to go for the Jewish community here in Cape Town. I have no doubt that the next chapter, the next 120 years and beyond, will be just as impressive, just as influential, just as productive, and just as contributive to our city as the 120 that we are looking back on today. Mazel Tov.